Welcome to the Elly Twineyo show. This is the place where we bring you ideas that matter. Every Friday, we bring you ideas on knowledge pillars of development insights, exporting basics, family businesses, and the society. As we discuss these ideas so that you understand first, you decide and move. How do countries develop? How do countries become prosperous? In the previous episode already, we looked at different aspects that we covered, and we are continuing. And in this episode, I want to look at only two aspects. One, the role of leaders compared with institutions, and the role of the state. Let's begin with the role of leaders. Are leaders important in the development of countries? Are leaders responsible for your poverty in your countries? Are leaders responsible for the poverty of their countries? Are leaders responsible for the happiness of countries? Are leaders responsible for the disease in their countries? Are leaders responsible for women dying while giving birth in their countries? Let's look at leaders. In my view, and it has been agreed globally and by development experts, but also by politicians, but also by society, that leaders matter. Good leaders are important for the development of their countries. Bad leaders are bad for their countries. Bad leaders in history have been responsible for the collapse, for the fall of their countries, sometimes for the fall of even their empires. Good leaders have been responsible for the success, for the economic gains, for the prosperity, for household incomes, for jobs, for happiness, for good roads, for good health facilities, for power, and for overall development of their countries. And this is not debatable. We know there has been argument, depending whether you live in the west, north, or south of the world, where the argument is that sometimes the argument is that institutions more than leaders are important. But in this episode, I will tell you that leaders matter as well as institutions. Good leaders in different countries were responsible for the development of their countries. We see leaders in Korea, Republic of Korea, whose capital is Seoul. I'm not talking about Pyongyang. Pyongyang is the other part of Korea which is different. The one which is regarded and known as developed is the Republic of Korea or South Korea within the Korean Peninsula. They are developed because they had good leaders. In the history of their development, I can cite one of their leaders, General Park Chung-hee. General Park is associated with the miracle of the Han River. The Koreans are very proud to say General Park is associated with the miracle of the Han River, associated with the industrial development. When you visit Busan, which was just a small, poor harbor, place, it was turned into one of the world's greatest ports and harbors in the world, and especially in the Asian subcontinent. Imports and exports flowing. Remember, Korea didn't have a lot of natural resources, like some countries in North America, like some countries in Africa and other places. But their leaders turned their country into a successful one. Their leaders gave good leadership, and they guided the state. And the state went into industries, The state went into services, into banking, and the rest. And this country, Korea, is now developed, is now advanced. But also we can talk about leaders in Singapore. Kuan Yew. Kuan Yew was the leader of Singapore for quite some time, for more than 3 decades, I think. But is associated with developing that country. He developed the country's harbour and port. He developed the country's inland. He developed the country's education. In fact, it is important that I mention that Kuan Yew did a great thing. He went to those communities, to the disadvantaged, underprivileged communities and families, and supported and encouraged their children to go to school. And encouraged them, said, poverty should end with your parents. You should be prosperous. Of course, when you go to Singapore, it has many, many dollar millionaires. Several dollar millionaires. So for this, Kuan Yew himself writes about it in his book, where he says, Singapore from the last to the first world. So it became the first world. And it is not that it had no challenges. It had challenges of different communities. Sometimes other people derogatorily call it tribes. I don't talk about tribes. I call them communities, ethnic groups. It is not that they had minerals and other natural resources, but leadership was a dividend, and it helped them get out of poverty and also advanced. There are even other places we can discuss leadership. We can discuss leadership when USA was developing. We can discuss leadership in Great Britain when they were developing. We can discuss leadership in Japan. We can now discuss leadership in China. Deng Xiaoping, the name is very difficult for me. Is it Zhang Ming, the leader who started the move of China integrating global, especially entering the market economy, where he says China will be a socialist country with market characteristics. This was so important. Once China embraced the market economy, but with its own political characteristics, it advanced. Recently, China got over 600 million human beings out of poverty, which is a great achievement. And knowing that China is such a big, humongous country with a lot of population, one would say if they were poor, they would be too much poor, isn't it? And there would be too many poor people in the world. So yes, leadership, don't discredit it. In fact, the argument that even when you are landlocked or geographically disadvantaged, you are not located near the sea where you can transport your goods and goods to the market and from the market, imports and exports. If you have good leadership, you can manage. And we have seen leaders begin to do so in different parts of the world, including African countries, which are regarded to be landlocked. We will discuss that in detail. Different countries that geographically are disadvantaged but are developing because of leadership in the coming episodes of this show. So leadership is important. Institutions are important. But see, when they say institutions, what do they mean? If you are in USA or in UK or in Germany or France, when they say institutions, they normally refer to democracy, human rights, property rights, and the rule of law and order. So if a country has got good leaders and also is practicing democracy, that country is good. That country is developed. So we should harmonize leadership, leaders, good leaders, and institutions. In my case, it is not a choice of leaders only and institutions separately. Leaders separately and institutions separately. It is all together. Good leaders should begin on the road to growth by encouraging democratic tendencies, human rights, and rule of law. So, yeah, institutions and leadership matter. The other important aspect that I'm coming to is role of the state. Role of the state. What we call role of the state, you can as well call it role of government. So when countries are developing, they require a lot of the role of the state. They need the government to play a big part. See here, for example, what Japan did in some places, they established the rail lines. They established the rail lines and encouraged the private companies to use them, to use those rail lines. Sometimes it is too expensive to establish, to construct a rail line. It is so difficult. It is so expensive. So you need government to inject in money. What did Korea do? What Korea did is that Korea, using its own banking institutions, like Korea Development Bank, and funding institutions like national investment funds, they supported companies, especially what we call shabo, very large family conglomerates, which later on became high flyers and now are known globally. I'll give an example of Samsung. Samsung was a trading company dealing in dry fish. Some of the dry fish, it was exporting it to China. Noodles and local food. What is Samsung now? Samsung now is one of the world flyers, competing with American companies like iPhone, Apple. So they gave it financial support, they gave it state support, they gave it state backing, they promoted it, they gave even subsidies and tax incentives. They even supported it on R&D, and now they are successful. This would have been expensive for small companies when they are starting in such economies. Another example we can look at is Japan. What did Japan do? What Japan did, for example, it established factories and shipyards, but also established companies which they later sold to private sector at the cheapest prices. The immediate example is Mitsubishi, Toyota, Sony, Nippon Steel, Sony, and Nintendo. These were companies that had been established by government, and it sold them at the lowest price to the private sector. So this was boosting the private sector. And these companies are some of the high flyers. They are some of the big exporter companies in the world globally. And Japan also went and did all the other incentives, including financial support, including market access, negotiating markets, including convincing America, which became their partner, to access markets. Say, give us markets, we'll be peaceful. And they got this market and they made a lot of money. Japan now is too rich. Its savings ratio is the highest. They are successful. But also we can look at recent China. China owns companies, they are state-owned companies. China supports projects, companies even to invest in projects outside of China, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa. China supports companies to industrialize, supports countries for technology and R&D. And as you know, China now is advancing and soon will be one of the most prosperous countries in the world. As you know, China is #1 in global GDP after United States of America. So the role of the state is so important. It was also important, of course, in Singapore. It was important in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, It is being important now in Malaysia, Indonesia, even in India, and it is developing. Let me mention that during COVID, the role of the state came back and was paramount. And Trump then was the president of the United States of America. He said he put a lot of money in private companies to do R&D, research and development. And they came out with what? With the drugs for COVID. UK put in a lot of money also in the research for COVID, and we got money. We got medicine. Globally, the world was saved by the investments that were made by the leaders and the government of USA, UK, also China. I'm told also some was done in Russia. There are even some African countries, also small countries, but important countries, which invested during COVID, the role of the state, including countries like Uganda, which came up with the COVID medicine, came out even with the COVID drug that helped many people, and death was averted. So the role of the state is important. When countries are starting out to develop, the government has to invest money in government efforts, but also in the private sector. But once the country has advanced, then the government can begin to reduce its role in the private sector, including the investing. Then the government can remain to do what government is supposed to do: tax the private sector, law and order, governance, security and defense, but still remain developing human capital and sometimes fiscal capital. Ladies and gentlemen, watching me globally, wherever you are, let me tell you, this show is getting exciting every time, every Friday, because every Friday we bring you a new topic of discussion, and I invite you to watch this show, because this is where we can exchange ideas so that you understand, decide, and move.